To review a decision to drop corruption charges against President Jacob Zuma is set to continue in the High Court in Pretoria today. The Democratic Alliance made the application to reinstate the charges.
Finally, the NPA and President Jacob Zuma are answering in court. DA believes that Mshe's decision was unjust and irrational and wants it set aside.
That what appears from this is that the decision of Mr. Mshe was an impulsive decision. It wasn't at that stage a reasoned decision. We would submit it wasn't at that stage a rational decision, backed by any reasons. It was a decision which reflected his own sense of betrayal and anger and outrage over the McCarthy conduct.
The NPA says the tapes show political interference and manipulation in Zuma's prosecution, but the DA insists the timing of the indictment did not affect the strength of the corruption charges against Zuma.
Mr. Mshe, the decision maker, failed to take proper account of or failed to attach sufficient weight to the nature and circumstances of the corruption and related charges.
But the NPA holds a different view. The NPA faced difficult questions from the panel of judges about whether there was evidence that the alleged political conspiracy involved President Thabo Mbeki.
There's no evidence that President Mbeki himself was conspiratorial in this prosecution. The point is that McCarthy and Nnuka, with or without the assistance of President Mbeki, were proceeding with one agenda and one motive, and that was to try and ensure that President Mbeki was successful at Polokwane. So there's no evidence that President Mbeki was involved in this, but it's what McCarthy was doing.
The DA is hoping to have the 783 charges of corruption, fraud and racketeering against the president reinstated. But in a statement, the presidency has described this as abuse of process by the main opposition to advance a political agenda. Manqoba Mchunu, SABC News at the North Gauteng High Court.
Now for an update, we cross the live to Aldrin Sampear, our reporter who's at the High Court in Pretoria. Aldrin, a very good morning to you. And let's start off by what happened yesterday. Can you just give us a short roundup?
Well, just basically looking at what happened yesterday is that we heard the evidence being led there by the DA's counsel and Sean Berger really going to the nitty-gritties of what their argument is that basically that the decision by Gauteng Mshe at the time to drop the charges were done in a fit of rage, that he was angry and he decided to drop the charges without really considering whether the gravitas of the discussion or the conversations between Leonard McCarthy as well as Bulelani Nnuka at the time were of such a nature that President Jacob Zuma would not have a fair trial. Remember that in the decision to drop the charges against President Jacob Zuma, Gauteng Mshe said that there was an abuse of process, and what the DA wants the court to decide is whether there was an abuse and what's the gravitas of that abuse. Is it of such a nature that President Jacob Zuma would have not received a fair trial? The argument from the NPA side is that when interpreting the conversations between Mr. McCarthy and the former NPA head Bulelani Nnuka, what the court should also bring into consideration is the context in which those conversations were happening. And those conversations, as the NPA believes, were happening in the process of trying to get President Jacob Zuma trying to get Thabo Mbeki to win at the Polokwane conference, which was set to take place in 2007 in December. Remember that the NPA decided back in November the 30th to reinstate the charges against President Jacob Zuma, but there was a back and forth as to when exactly should those charges be reinstated. Should it be before the Polokwane conference or should it be after the Polokwane conference? And the NPA is saying that what happened, what is clear, is that McCarthy was quite central in pulling the strings as to when the charges are laid against President Jacob Zuma, and the charges were eventually laid on. The indictment was served on the 20th or after the Polokwane conference happened, and this was to make sure, as the NPA says, that President Jacob Zuma does not become president of the country.
What is likely to happen today, Aldrin?
Well, today we expect the NPA will obviously start off this morning as well, continue to lead evidence why they feel Gauteng made the right decision, and his decision was rational at the time to drop the charges against President Jacob Zuma. But quite a difficult question coming yesterday from one of the justices here is that whether Gauteng knew about the Browse Mole report at the time that they decided to drop the charges on the 1st of April. Remember that on the 31st of March, after a meeting between the NPA acting head at the time, the decision was to continue with prosecuting President Jacob Zuma. But after Gauteng listened to the tapes, even though he had access to the transcripts before the 1st of April, he decided on the 1st of April that actually they will drop those charges against President Jacob Zuma and not continue with pressing the charges or prosecuting President Jacob Zuma. So we expect more explanation from the NPA how Gauteng arrived at the decision not to prosecute the president. And then after that we expect Kemp, who is representing the President Jacob Zuma, also to be leading evidence. And after that we have a friend of the court who will also be leading evidence. We know that this hearing is set down for 3 days, so tomorrow will be the final day, and then we'll wait for a decision from the court whether the charges against President Jacob Zuma should be reinstated and whether that decision by Gauteng was irrational.
What time is the court proceedings supposed to get underway this morning?
We expect the court proceedings to start around about 10 o'clock this morning. And if we look at what happened yesterday, it might be a long one in terms of the cross-questioning that will happen with the NPA and the decision to drop the charges. And probably we would adjourn around about 4 p.m.
Aldrin, as usual, thank you so much for a wonderful update, and you'll keep us updated as to the court case as it unfolds there. That was our reporter on the scene, Aldrin Sampear, and we'll keep you abreast of the happenings there. We'll probably go there live around about 10 o'clock as